Good evening, everyone. A warm welcome to tonight's TS talk and discussion. My name is Maurice Jenkinson, and I shall be hosting and moderating this evening's presentation, which will be recorded and be available on the TS YouTube portal within a couple of days. Tonight, it is our pleasure at the TS to welcome back Ted Capstick, whose talk tonight is entitled Esoteric Psychology Meets Astrology. Ted, it's a great pleasure, of course, to have you with us again this evening. Before I hand over to Ted, I just need to mention that the TS supports complete freedom of individual thought, viewpoints, and opinions. It is important to realise that any views expressed this evening are those of the individual and do not necessarily represent the formal views and opinions of the society. Now, Ted, it's my pleasure to hand over to you, and if you just give me a few minutes, I will try to find you on the list here. There's a few people still entering. Let me just admit those first. I'll ask you to unmute while you're waiting for me, Ted.
You should be able to hear me now.
Yes. I think if everyone puts Ted onto speaker, it will be helpful. Oh, there we are, Ted. I've got you. Okay. I'll spotlight you now. Here we are.
Okay. Thank you, Maurice, for the introduction, and good evening to everybody. I would like to say that in my opening remarks, I'm going to go as broad as possible so that we can try and see the context in which I consider these two subjects, that is esoteric psychology and esoteric astrology, which I shall define in the course of the evening for those who want something precise, seems to come along to us at a particular point on the evolutionary circle. So if we go right back to our understanding of that circle and we consider the poles of spirit and matter, then there is the downward or involutionary arc from spirit to matter, and the returning arc from matter back to spirit, which we call the evolutionary arc. But very, very few times do I see this as called the subjectivization or resubjectivization as we go back to spirit, and the objectivization as we fall into matter. Because it's important to know that humanity didn't all start out at the same time. We have a different number of lives behind us all, and those that went on first had the opportunity to become perfected in the way we understand masters and of course avatars, and those beings that we understand as the Buddha and the Christ went on and went through the experiences before we go through, and in fact have left us great signposts, and this is why we study the wisdom as to follow the way. But consider the fact that when we're on our early journey down from the subjective matter, and we call it the fall of man, my understanding of the divine plan is that the so-called expulsion from the Garden of Eden was in fact part of the plan of man gaining qualities and capacities to be able to function in objective situations, i.e. materialism. And so when we start out on this journey, we're very much gaining what I call reaction capacities in mental, emotional, and physical matter. This is the arc of experience. It's also the arc of the mystic more than the occultist, because the mystic is forever wanting to get back, to get back to the one, to get back to the Garden of Eden, to understand the subjective nature of reality. And in fact, there's a whole plethora of Indian, particularly Hindu and Buddhist yogic practices which are aimed at getting one back. And we can do this, but it's on a very, very fleeting basis. We don't have an experience of samadhi for maybe, half an hour even. Maybe some yogis do. But from what I've heard other people tell me, it can be very fleeting. And that's because we have to turn our attention to being involved with matter. There is no real escape back to spirit, particularly if we're on the involutionary arc, because we're still not reached the nadir. And even when we reach the nadir and we start to travel up on the evolutionary arc again, we are confronted with the fact that we have got hundreds of lifetimes behind us of involutionary experience. And by atavism, this involutionary experience is extremely strong. And therefore a conflict arises. Most of the people I see for either ray analysis or esoteric astrological chart interpretation are battling, as I have done and am doing still to a certain extent, this materialistic or involutionary atavism from previous lives with the inspiration of the soul and the monad pulling us back up to the heights through the evolutionary arc and calling us back home to our divinity, which as students of the wisdom, we're very comfortable with. We realize that there is the divinity with us. But it seems to me from the hundreds of people that I've met over the years, there's an impatience with material things. They want to get rid of it. They want to shut it out. I don't want to be involved in this. I'm going. And we know in past times, in the Piscean age, that people locked themselves in caves and monasteries to do such work of purification. But it really doesn't address the question of why we're down here in physical form. It's not just to pay off karma from these previous lives, which keeps bringing us back again and again. If we any karma, either in debit or in credit, we get brought back to the place where the action and reaction has to be equalized and balanced out. And so it is my understanding that when we're on the involutionary arc, we are not so much expected to understand the energies that play on us. We experience them, energies of personality, broken down, mental, physical, emotional, etc. But we don't label them. But when we get onto the path of evolution, the way of the mystic is not going to be sufficient to get us back to spirit. We have to start bottom up and start to understand what these energies are, why our astral body is the way it is, what our soul's purpose is in terms of the ray makeup. And it may have taken me the best part of 20 years to find the system, but the only system, and most of you know me, I'm a serious student of the wisdom, and I've got, well, I wouldn't like to say how many books I've got, but I've got 2 libraries in one small house. I have dug and dug and dug, and I cannot find a system that teaches man to know thyself in the way that the system of that I'm going to just in outline describe tonight, with the hope that some of you may want to look into it yourself in the way that I've looked into it. So the Delphic Oracle says, man, know thyself. If you don't know yourself, you cannot change yourself. And we change ourselves because we feel that we're not the final product yet. We've got flaws. And if we're serious about spiritual development, and we're serious about letting those that watch know that we are serious, and they're waiting to see that beacon of light from our aura to know that we've got some sort of commitment to this work, then we will know that we have to start to look at our personalities. It may be the physical side, it may be the mental side, it could be usually is the emotional side, and how to improve that side of things, because it's the way we handle energy, that is going to determine our future. Are we going to come back again in whatever guise? We can make and remake our futures with the secret of karma, if we know that karma that I'm talking about here, personal karma, is in the three worlds of personality, those three levels that we're all so familiar with. And so we need to know what these energies are. And then we need to know how to handle these energies correctly. So we need to start to be an occultist. An occultist works bottom up and starts to want to understand what the energies are. And so tonight in outline, I'm going to go through this, what Alice Bailey in her books takes up 3 volumes of the 5 volumes of a treatise on the 7 rays, the first 2 on psychology and the third one on astrology, and just say to you how I know it to be the only system of self-realization and working for the West in the way that it does. I think my 25 years of practical work in the field tells me, and the much demand for it, tells me that this is something that's valuable. One wouldn't want to put a lot of energy and effort into something which was a hobby or something which, we like doing this. Oh, yes, it's good. We want to do something which we know at the end of the day is very, very important for our future life, because all these rays point to masters. And there are 7 Chohan masters, 7 chief masters, as it were, in charge of these rays. And so if we don't understand what rays they are, how are we going to understand who or where our master may be, or where our soul may be, in what ashram our soul may be? So before going into it, just to recap, on the involutionary arc, we can learn a lot. It's knowledge. It's knowledge because we can learn about cosmogenesis, and it's knowledge. We can't necessarily apply it to ourselves. It's knowledge, and it's part of gaining reaction capacities and opening what we call knowledge petals. But when we're more evolved, we should find that we want to understand more about what we are. And so if the involutionary path is knowledge, the evolutionary path is wisdom. Because with wisdom, we take knowledge and we forge it into our own personality structures, and then take an antakarana to the soul and forge it into that structure as well, which is in the superconsciousness, or if you like, part of the unconscious, until we start to make overtures towards it. So I wonder whether we could have the first slide, please, Maurice. Just some schematic diagrams to help focus the attention, really. Now, I've got this idea here where we're going to start, and in the beginning was the word, and I'm using Aum here, which could be any form of the Trinity that you would like, including the Christian Trinity if you wanted. And at that point, we start to have a differentiation of energies, and the Trinity that I've chosen here, because this slide shows it, but this is a very good one, is what Plato used to talk about. He used to talk about the 3 qualities of spirit, and he would say they are truth, beauty, and goodness. And in a Christian theology, that would be the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Now, it's said that our monad, which is the divine spark, is on one of those rays, And those rays, it says 7 there, do have a trinity themselves. And we'll look at all of these, but ray 1 in a moment. Ray 1 would be the ray of truth. Ray 2 would be the ray of beauty. And ray 3 would be the ray of goodness. In some commentaries later on, take that goodness and put it into justice, but I feel very happy with truth, beauty, and goodness. And because evolution is about elaboration, these 3 react to each other and make 4 more. So 1 reacts with 2, 1 reacts with 3, making 2 more, 2 reacts with 3, etc., etc., until you get 1, 2, and 3 reacting together to give 7. And then we have the constellations in the sky. 80 something constellations in the sky, I think it is, of which 12 have been extracted through the wisdom of the ages into the 12 we're very familiar with. And we call those 12 constellations the Zodiac, but they're a minority in the Zodiac. The Zodiac in the amongst the constellations, the Zodiac as we know it is 12, but it is the 12 most important according to the initiated wisdom that's been passed down to us, and we know those as Aries through to Pisces. And of course, as I say, we will expect there to be many, many more if we look at things astronomically. And so we're down to the Zodiac there. And the Zodiac is important because in your horoscope, you will have planets, the next line down, and you will have houses. There happen to be 12 houses, which are exact correspondences of the 12 signs of the Zodiac, but we'll also have planets as well. And you'll have 12 houses and you'll have 12 planets in esoteric form, but you won't have all planets in all the signs of the Zodiac. Now, the point here is that this is a continuous diagram, and it implies that the 7 rays, as they do, find their way into the Zodiac. And so we're starting to move from oneness and the Aum right the way through to a trinity, from a trinity ad a quaternity to get 7 rays, and then the 7 rays permeate the Zodiac. And the 4th slide will show you which signs have which, after we've defined the rays, which rays in them. And what's so crucial about this is that if you, like me, or if I have planets in Aries, I'm Sun in Taurus and Leo rising, but I have planets in Aries and Scorpio and a few other signs, those signs will be important to me as something I have to work through in this life. But I can go further than that with the rays. I can say the ray complement of those signs, which are in quality terms, is something I can work with because they're not abstract. They're very, very defined qualities, as we shall see it in the 2nd slide shortly. And so the meeting place, in fact, of esoteric psychology and astrology is, in fact, that continuum. It's not 2 separate things. So, of course, these things, we always pigeonhole things. So I say, oh, that's easy. Are you talking about the astrology or the psychology now, Ted? Well, I'm talking about a scheme which we have to see in synthetic form. It's one energy step down. The energy is being transformed as we go through these lower and lower manifestations. And so at the bottom we have the houses, and so we have a house for profession, the 10th house, and responsibility, a house for physical health, the 6th, a house for the watery emotions, the 8th, etc. These are things which we readily understand as terrestrial experience. And so if we have a planet in a sign, that planet will also have a ray complement. And therefore, the planet in the sign in the house will be a fusion of the rays of the planet, the sign, and the house. But unless you know what these energies are that make up the particular sign, the particular planet, the particular house, you're not going to be able to interpret this chart at all. Yes, there are a lot of different astrological systems, and you all know lots of them. None of them use the 7 rays, except the system of esoteric astrology, originally suggested by the Tibetan Djwal Khul through the AAB books, and later worked on much, and I was very privileged to be part of the group that developed it, a practical working of the esoteric astrology. You can't do practical work from esoteric astrology by Alice Bailey. Maybe a little bit with Alan Leo, who lived 30 years earlier and came up with some good ideas, and I was talking about those on Sunday. but by and large, it's abstruse if you read it in the Bailey work, but it's wonderfully detailed once you put the time into trying to understand it. And what I'm trying to do here is to say there is a much more practical system available, and it's something that's been at the center of my life for many years now. So yes, there's a good but simple synthetic diagram of how it is supposed to work. So I think I should name these rays now for you, if I might do that with the second slide, please, Morris. Thank you. So there we are, and we should be able to recognize these even without any explanation. But if I say to you, if we just consider the first three at the moment as the Trinity, these are called rays of aspect. And ray 1 is said to be related to the movement out of the unmanifest, which I will define as the infinite potency which has not yet occurred, if you like, out of a phase of pralaya. The first movement in space, as it were, the first incentive to manifest would come from the first ray of will and power. And it's said to be the ray of initiation, and it's said to be lots of things, but it is the highest frequency vibration of all of the rays. And I think in Madame Blavatsky's terms, it will be the third system that's yet to come, the third solar system that is yet to come. The first system used active intelligence and goes back to the situation where we have the seed of mind planted in rudimentary man by the so-called Manasaputras 18.5 million years ago in the Lemurian age. And this has given man the opportunity to develop abstract mind. And this is our manas of the soul. And so the Atma would be the will and power. The love wisdom would be the buddhi. Now, this is important. It's love hyphen wisdom, not love and wisdom. The two are interchangeable. Love is love lovingly applied, and love wisely and wisdom lovingly applied. Love wisely, the Christ at the heart, wisdom lovingly applied, the Buddha at the brow. And my understanding is it is these two avatars who have in this second solar system that are vibrating to the beautiful, we'll see the colors shortly, indigo blue ray of love wisdom has brought about the understanding in man's consciousness of the development along love and wisdom lines. And it is said that something like 70% of Western souls, said by, I should say who, by Alice Bailey and Douglas Baker, who've both done tremendous amount of work on it, ray analysis that is, 70% of the souls in the West are on the ray of love wisdom. And it encompasses all the healers, all the teachers, all the therapists, or all the counselors, and everybody who seeks to aid humanity through those particular avenues. And those three together then make up the Trinity. And when they combine, ray 4, we'll see here, is a combination of rays 1 and 2. Rays 1 and 2 combine to give ray 4, which is the ray of art, huge human expression field, and harmony through conflict, something very different, the polar opposite. Art is Taurus, harmony and conflict, you'll see, is Scorpio. And we get here this idea that there is something here in the artist that is going to be very conflicted. And indeed, if we look at the lives of so many famous artists, we know what terrible conflict they had to put up with whilst expressing the beauty, because it's got some beauty in it. It's got some ray 2 in it, which we defined as partly being beauty earlier on with our truth, beauty, and goodness. Ray 5 is the combination of rays 1 and 3. And this is the other big field of human endeavor that we know, and that's the scientific field. And it's interesting that Ray 5 is made up of what we call will rays only. So if we look at the Roman numerals there, rays 1, 3, 5, and 7 are will rays, and 2, 4, and 6 are love rays. The will rays pertain particularly to the left side of the brain, the rational side, the logic reasoning side of things, and rays 2, 4, and 6, the less dominant rays, because they are said to be much more passive in their action, but they're deeper in many ways, relate to the right hemisphere of the brain, which in modern man is not so well developed. It's not the dominant sphere. All our education at school, or most of our education at school, is aimed at the left hemisphere. But people with art, music, people that are able to write with their left hand. Remember, the right side of the brain rules the left side of the body. People like Paul McCartney, who would play bass with it as a left-hander, tremendously artistic, not just with writing music, but poetry and painting and all kinds of artistic development, very, very strong on that side. Ray 6 is rays 2 and 3 put together, and the ray of devotion and idealism was important in the Piscean age to bring it down to the level of aspiration, but maybe not to bring it right the way through to spiritual action on earth. And so we have people involved in religions who are very idealistic. It's there, but also very devotional. And we have to be careful with devotion because it can become dogmatic. And one of the vices, because all these rays have got their virtues and have got their vices, and it's part of the beauty of understanding the rays. One of the vices of the sixth ray of devotion and idealism is that it can be very exclusive. And we look at the religions and we see how exclusive they all can be. Whereas the second ray of love wisdom at a much higher frequency is inclusive and understands, as theosophists, we understand, we look at the study of comparative religion and we try and be much more even-handed about things. It is said in the Bailey works that Ray 1 relates to Islam, Ray 2 to Christianity, and Ray 3 to Judaism. But we then come to Ray 7, which is the ray of ceremonial order and ritual, a ray that this world does not know very much about. But we could see ceremonial in everyday life. Well, I was watching some of the, I'm not mad on watching all the Olympics. I've watched enough cricket and football and golf and tennis recently to not want to watch the Olympics, but I watched the opening ceremony. And that, of course, ceremony is ceremonial, or the trooping of the colour, the changing of the guard when they take place down in London. And if you've got some seventh ray in you, you'll feel a shiver down your spine when you see some of this ceremonial performed. It will mean something to you. The order is to bring order out of chaos, but it's order in terms of the divine plan. And ritual, well, we can talk about ritual. It's very much occult to do with the fact that when we do something, we create a track in space and we do it again and again, that track becomes more and more. So when we're chanting a mantra or using rosary beads, we build up the energy by repeating, and this is part of what ritual is about. Now, the important thing practically now, that was a little bit about the rays, the important thing practically is that we have 5 vehicles that we deal with these rays, and 6 if you count the monad, but most people have got enough to do with 5. Physical body, emotional body, and mental body, umbrellaed as the personality. And then we have the personality will be the 4th, will be the composite of the first 3, and the 5th will be the soul. And each of these components of energy has one of these qualities to it. And we're expected to, on the evolutionary arc, as I understand it, know what these qualities are. So we would say know our ray complement through ray analysis. And then we need to express what we're meant to express, because we're meant to be expressions of the divine self. And that divine self would have us along one of the major rays. So a master at the 5th initiation. Talked a lot about initiation in my talk on Tuesday, and I won't go over it here, but initiation is important in seeing ourselves as being increasingly subatomic and therefore light, as opposed to atomic and therefore matter. And we do this by raising the vibrations from the lower rays to the higher rays. But we can't do this unless we know what we're doing and what we're working with. And are we in fact stuck with ray 5, just gaining knowledge about things, etc., etc. We know all about this and all about that, but actually we're still stuck down at level 5. But really, we should be at level 3 or level 2, where knowledge is turned into wisdom. So here is a Jacob's ladder, if you like, to quote the Old Testament, of going back up to the soul. And it's interesting with the monad, if we want to go further, that it's said that of all the monads in incarnation, this was around about the 1950s, and there are many, many more monads out of incarnation at any one time than in incarnation. So in an incarnation with the soul and a personality, only 5% were will and power. But the other 95% were equally split between love, wisdom, ray 2, and active intelligence. And so at our core, at our monadic level, we are pulled by one of those 3 great energies. But of course, we might feel that that great energy is the soul. It's love, wisdom. It's what I do. I'm a nurse. I teach, whatever it might be. Second ray, very clearly. We wouldn't necessarily know that was the monadic ray yet, but we would know that it was a higher part than the personality, because we're giving out our energies for others. So I think probably that deals well enough with that. But just to finish off, saying that the ray complement, and I'll just give you mine as an example. I've got a ray 2 soul, a ray 3 personality, a ray 5 mental body, which is on the line of concrete knowledge and science. If I was to have a ray 4 mental body, it would mean I was artistic. I was more right brain orientated. I would be writing more about subjects which were much, much harder to define. Maybe even along the devotional level, which is also at level 6, but it's also a very, very love ray energy. I've got a 6-ray astral body, and that has helped me. Some people, some commentaries have said that a 6-ray astral body, yes, that's devotion, that's Pisces, that you don't want anything to do with that age. It's very good to be devoted to one's ashram, or to one's line of spiritual development, or devoted to your, or committed to your own spiritual path. And I found the 6-ray astral can be very, very useful. Again, you have to be careful of the disadvantages of exclusiveness. But then I've got a 3rd-ray astral body, and a 3rd-ray physical body. And it's a physical body and brain. So we can't change the physical body, but look at it when we say brain. The 3rd-ray brain, the 3rd ray is diverse, and it can deal with an awful lot of things at once. When I used to be working in the finance function in the NHS, I would have an in-tray that was a lot of projects on the go, pull one out, do a bit more on this, pull one out, put another one there. And yes, the secretary saying, I'll arrange these meetings. Can you have a quick word, someone on the phone, put this email out? I was happy doing that. Give that to a 7th ray. Just a minute, I'm on the phone. Don't ask me to file. I'm doing this. I'll come and see you after I've done that. And so it's important to know that the brains go in conjunction with the ray complement of the physical, the physical ray, whatever the physical ray is on. And therefore, we notice here a distinction between the brain and the mind, something that some people that I've talked to seem to have difficulty with, the idea that the brain isn't the mind. Well, we know at death that brain activity is zero, there's no brain. And yet we even know from our dreams, and sleep is like a temporary death because we're not attached to brain consciousness completely. We know that there are mental components that come through very strongly. So we always bear in mind that you can have a completely different ray of the physical brain as you do, as I do. In fact, I have a ray 5 mind and a ray 3 brain. And so it's useful to know that because we can change certain things. We can't change the ray of the physical body and brain, and we cannot change the ray of the soul. But there are methods, and they're described in Esoteric Psychology 1 and 2 and other works as well. One major work, which I'll tell you about now if you want to stick with the rays, and that is 2 volumes by Michael Robbins, who runs a school in America. I'm sure some of you attend his webinars. People talk to me about them and say how good they are. But his 2 books are called Tapestry of the Gods. And he believes, as I do, or understands probably more than I do, that the 7 rays are the architects of the divine plan. So we have this idea of being able to look at ray structures in great detail. How does a ray 2 work with a ray 1 if one's at the soul level and one's on the personality level? Wonderful stuff if you've got the time to do it. And I've found the time to do it in the past. And it's very, very rewarding. So if you don't want to stick with esoteric literature, stick with something that is very, very, very quickly now making esoteric psychology exoteric. And my view is in with 50 years, this won't be an esoteric psychology. In fact, it's not now in my view. It might have been in Bailey's day and even Baker's day. But if you seriously look into the work of Michael Robbins, and he's created a whole school. He's called it the University of the 7 Rays in America. And his webinars are fabulous, absolutely fabulous. So I would say that he's doing tremendous service work in getting people to know themselves. But there's a lot of detail there. There's an awful lot of detail, but it's in today's language and it's very useful in that sense. So really, we don't need to spend too long on ray 3 because I need to get into the astrology a bit more. Sorry, slide 3, if I could, Morris. Have slide 3 up there with the... I'm afraid the colours have become a bit distorted in copying. Just a few points I want to make here. Yes, we won't spend too long on this. Actually, it's the 7 rays that you've seen in order there. We have them with their colours. Now, the ray of will and power. If you could just can you just point to that? Will and power is said to be a magenta pink colour, which is just there. It is there where we've got the cross on there. And if that's ray 1, if we move up ray 2, that colour again faded, that should be indigo blue. Yes, active intelligence is the green of ray 3. And let me just give us an example here. I mentioned about the each of the signs of the zodiac. Ray 3, active intelligence, is 85% of the energy of Libra. And Libra rules nature. And we can see, therefore, the colour must be green. It's the middle colour of the spectrum: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. Green is the balancing colour, the colour of harmony. And we say, let's go out into the country. I just need to be surrounded by rural and nature. It's green. It's beautiful in its balancing qualities. And very often with health situations, there is an indication through Libra that something is out of balance. It might be hormones, it might be the kidneys that are osmoregulators, but we can get a lot from looking at Libra and bringing things back into balance. And it is said that right at the center of things is the peace that in the New Testament will be called the peace that passeth all understanding. And understanding will come from the intuition, which will come from the second ray. There is a point of peace right at the center of all things, where everything is balanced out and there is no need for movement. And that brings us back to this idea of not just a pralaya, but of a completed journey, the return back to the center of peace. And so Libra, very important. And I know in my own life with having a Ray 3 personality, how much this has meant to me, how much in my own life I've had to address imbalances, virtually every area of my life I can think of, but how much I do appreciate understanding as a budding occultist why this is and why it isn't necessarily so for the fourth ray, which we see in that beautiful yellow color of harmony through conflict. And yes, it is the same word harmony as I've just been talking about with the middle thing, but it only harmony through the third ray is achieved by moving through balance, moving to adjust something so that it becomes in balance. Whereas it's tougher, the fourth, because it's got Ray 1 in it for a start. Conflict occurs. So we get the plateau of harmony, but only after a conflict. So he goes harmony, conflict, harmony, conflict, harmony, conflict. So we do get the harmony, but it's always punctuated with a lesson to learn, a crisis and a conflict. Orange is the color given to the ray of concrete knowledge and analytical science. So the scientists work on that. It's the ray of research, or the fantastic work that's been done with the understanding whether one agrees with the vaccine or not. Not a question for tonight. I've dealt with it in a number of seminars I've done, but whether one agrees or not, one does know that a lot of work, hard work and effort and clarity of mind and lack of emotion has to go into researching to this level of detail. And even amongst the vaccines, there are different ways of researching and different modus operandi that we have worked out. And when we put effort into something, we reap the reward through karma, good karma. And it is my view, and I've had this discussion with many unconventional, we'll call them healers, of the role that conventional medicine has to play along the way. Many people are kept alive in incarnation, if they want to be, by, and several friends of mine, medication that has been developed through human effort. And that human effort will be an expression of the fifth ray of concrete knowledge and analytical science. The devotion is said to be two colors. Actually, we only give one on the wheel. It's supposed to be sky blue and rose pink, the only dual color that there is. And it is very much aspirational, but without the aspiration being given legs. That is left for the seventh ray, and a ray which permeates a great deal of Jupiter and Aquarius, Jupiter, the esoteric ruler of Aquarius. And so that gives you a grounding in the rays, in so much as an hour or so tonight can do. And I want to just take it on a little bit further now through the astrology, which I've already alluded to, and say that where this becomes a useful tool, if I could have slide 4, please. In order to make this a working system for astrological interpretation and understanding, we have to work out, or it's worked out for us, we have to use what's been worked out and say, well, where do these rays appear? Now, I've given you the qualities of the rays in slide 2 and in slide 3, and there we have, and they are the astrological signs. Just too wordy to put all of them in, but let's just have a look at what this means. If ray 1 is to be expressed in the life of the person having their chart looked at, I would look for planets in Aries, which is the first sign there, to different extents, by the way. We can't put the percentages in, it'd make it too cramped. Taurus, which is the bull's head, Leo, which is like the tail there, Scorpio, something emerging, and Capricorn, said to be the signature of God. Now, Ray 2, I would be looking at Gemini, Leo, Virgo, and Pisces. And I'll just mention Ray 3 because I've already mentioned Libra. We've got Cancer. There's Libra, the bridge, the balance, Sagittarius, the arrow, and Capricorn again. So we have a fairly simple set of understanding, and it's not just this understanding. The understanding will come from what the particular signs stand for in terms of their houses. So Capricorn is responsibility. So if we look at responsibility, which is Capricorn, we see it in Ray 1 and we see it in Ray 3. Well, responsibility, Ray 1 comes with leadership, does it? Yes, of course it does. So these things, take my word for it, they marry together. Ray 3 has also got Capricorn in it. Active intelligence. Is it possible to take responsibility and exert authority through leadership without active intelligence? Almost certainly not. So we take something on the love side of things, and Ray 2. We look at the very first sign there in Ray 2, which is Gemini. Gemini is 2 pillars and 1 symbol. Roman numeral 2, and my understanding is that's a pillar of love, that's a pillar of wisdom, but it's joined together as one energy, which is the energy of love-wisdom. And so anybody with a lot of planets in Gemini would be somebody who had to develop heart qualities, as in fact they would with Leo. But there's 80 or 85% of the energy of Gemini is Ray 2. Leo is also very much Ray 2, but is 70% Ray 2. And I'm Leo rising, 30% Ray 1. So my soul's purpose, because I'm Leo rising, and the soul's purpose is to do with the rising sign, is 70% of Ray 2, which is my teaching work, and 30% of Ray 1. Now, one of the qualities of Ray 1, as I now understand it, is sacrifice and surrender. And I can't do my work without at least a 30% sacrifice and surrender to those things I don't yet understand, but which will, Ray 1, lead me. So there is an understanding that I can go so far with my love wisdom, but I need a degree of, and this is so with a surrender and sacrifice, and this is where the leadership comes from elsewhere. And if you allow yourself to be properly overshadowed by your soul, because your soul can't come into the brain unless you do disciplines such as meditation and study and cultivate a mental polarization. It can't come in unless it comes. If you allow yourself to be overshadowed, which is what the soul wants to do, and come into your life so that you can express some of its qualities, then there is a degree of sacrifice of the will of the personality. And this is something which we all have to come to an agreement, as it were, internally with, on what I call the vertical arm of the cross. Our outer life, even our service work, is on the horizontal arm of the cross. And so it plays down here. You've got the information there that I would work on. And so if someone has got, let's say, a planet in Scorpio, or more than one planet in Scorpio, it means not that they're endowed with scorpionic energies, which Orthodox astrology may well point to, but there's something in Scorpio that needs to be developed. And one of those things will be that fourth ray of harmony through conflict. And so I see somebody with Scorpio either rising or a number of planets, and I go, is this pattern ever come into your life? Harmony, comfort, all the time. Every time they say that, all the time, you've nailed it right at the beginning of the interpretation. And so this system works. Now, to turn it round the other way, people might say to me, right, well, I have got a plethora of planets in Aries, and I can look at this, or I know it in my head now, and I'll go, let's explore with you Ray 1 and Ray 7. People with Aries rising are frequently isolated because Ray 1 wants you to be thrown back on your own resources and to work through those resources on your own. Look around for somebody to make a decision with. Nobody there. You put truth before harmony. Truth before harmony. I'm sorry, you're my best friend, but if you can't accept this basic truth, I'd rather be on my own. I'll go off and ride my horse across the desert, my camel across the desert, and I need to be alone and to ponder on my own truth and plow my own furrow and do my own thing. And to a personality seeking some emotional solace in this life, that can be a very, very tough ascendant indeed. Leo there, I've already mentioned, my own ascendant, Ray 1 and Ray 2. Libra, I've already mentioned almost entirely Ray 3. Scorpio, difficult 3 energies there. We've got 3 there on the run, and probably the most difficult signs to have rising as well. So Scorpio, Ray 6 devotion. Yes, they can be very, very fixed in their aspiration and where they want to go, and this can be a problem. Ray 4 is the predominant ray, about 40-50% of Ray 4, harmony through conflict. They will get there in the end, but it seems that life wants them to keep growing and keep growing, keep growing. And then Ray 1, the Scorpio, needs to be able to deal and handle with such tough mixture of energies, really. And so they have to develop Ray 1. And that means that as soon as I start to speak to somebody with a lot of Scorpio, I'm immediately feeling some compassion for them, because I know before they tell me how difficult it is. And some people are very modest, and I'll say, this has been a hellishly difficult life. Oh, no more so than most people. And I say, come on. Yeah. All right, yes, it's been a hell. It's been a hell. And they'll admit it. Sagittarius, the ruler of the earth, also a difficult mix of energies there. Let's just go into Capricorn, probably the most difficult mix of the lot in terms of the fact that we've got there 3 will rays. So Capricorn, climbing the mountain face, sometimes getting lashed upon by the weather as well, and a sheer climb upwards. And you need Ray 3 active intelligence to know when to stop climbing and shelter for the night, or when the weather's going to close in and you need to stop climbing. You need the active intelligence. You need the Ray 5 in there to decide what gear you're going to go up the mountain with. Do you need the ice picks? Do you need the certain ropes and which shoes to wear? There's the active intelligence making that up. And of course, the will, Ray 1, the will to climb to the top of the mountain. And we're all symbolically climbing the mountain of initiation once we start to get up away from the nadir of the circle we started speaking about right at the beginning, and we start to climb the evolutionary path, and it gets steeper and steeper. But remember that the vista is there for us in increasing. We become increasingly conscious through the initiations of a greater and greater picture, the whole picture getting greater and greater. I think it was Winston Churchill talking, I believe, about an initiatory experience, and then the whole vista opened up to me, and just as I started, it got greater, and I saw even more and more. And of course, this is the experience we get as we climb higher and higher up the mountaintop. And again, when I speak to people with Capricorn rising, I look at them and I feel they are going through this, and I need to be mindful of what energies that they're being asked to deal with. And so in this kind of synopsis, which is all I can present in this time, and these type of things I do in workshops so we can really explore it, is to say to you that between the 2 systems, esoteric astrology and you can see we have on one side of A4, but there's so many dimensions to it, a working system laid down that has come from the second ray master Djwal Khul, and laid out in fabulous detail in those the books that I mentioned, the treatise on 7 rays, but also in Michael Robbins's book as well. And so I've got a working system here that allows me to, we do the ray analysis not through the horoscope, by the way, but the horoscope uses the rays to work out what the person is meant to be expressing. And of course, there's a high degree of correlation between your ray analysis, as I mentioned my own there, and your chart, but the level of detail is much, much greater as we go through the horoscope, because it's dealing with events in time, particularly with a moving horoscope, a time-based horoscope. Things move with time. And we've got the archetypes with the rays, but then as we go further and further down and bring in time, which is something to do with our conditioning, time, we're conditioned in time and space, we're moving down to a much lower level of energy understanding there as well. So I think probably, I'm just having a look here. Yes, I wanted to speak for about an hour, so there was plenty of time for questions or comments. I think I've probably covered, I didn't know how it will come out because there's no script for this tonight. It's just, I hope I've centered on all the things I meant to center on and underline, but maybe the questions might bring out some areas that require some clarification. But I think I'll like to stop it there in terms of the formal presentation, Maurice, and ask if anybody would like to hopefully ask me some questions. And they may be difficult as well, Tim, if you want.
Fine, thank you very much, Ted. I'm sure that was very helpful to many. Before Tim asks his difficult question, I'm going to take a prerogative and just ask you to elaborate on a little thing. I mentioned in the notification which I gave to members about your talk that a quote from the Tibetan, where he says, "There is little doubt that the indebtedness of the world to the trained psychologists cannot be estimated, but unless there is a key idea integrated into the whole field of thought, it will fall of its own weight." And there, of course, he's really referring to the psychological aspects of the personality without considering the other aspects which you've referred. I don't know if you want to just expand on that quote a little bit before we open it up.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I can. And essentially, I think if we look at the psychology that is being taught in universities today and has been for many years, it is built on the essential 2 factors of hereditary and environment. And my belief is that until you bring in a 3rd factor of the soul, you're just dealing with personality factors. And that is not going to get you very far, because you're seeing such a restricted picture of the constitution of man. You're seeing this umbrella of personality and a mental, emotional, and physical body. And it seems that until we understand that particular unit works in the world of effects and has nothing to do with the world of causes, unless we get up to at least the causal body, named for that very reason, which holds the essence of the soul, we're not going to see the purpose of this unit of energy that we call the personality being flung round, being tossed about on a sea of karma and effects. We're not going to see the causes behind it. And the whole point of going into this particular delineation is to understand the causes behind the effects. The way current psychology cuts it off, it doesn't bring in the soul at all. And so there is no causal factor involved. And I think that's what the Tibetan was referring to. It's going to fall apart because you're just faffing around, as it were, in the world of effects.
Oh, thank you for that, Ted. Okay, I'll open it up to questions. If you could just raise your hand if you want to ask a question, or raise the mechanical hand under reactions. And if I don't see your hand, because I can't see the whole screen, try to attract my attention in some other way. Okay. Anyone got a question? Hi, Richard.
Richard.
Sorry.
Okay, Richard, you're
Can you
fine.
hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted just to pick up on that very last comment there, Ted. Really about what the advantages of, you know, all of this wonderful knowledge that you have here. What the advantages are, and you mentioned about it helping to understand the causes behind an individual life. I'm just wondering whether you could just maybe give us one or two examples of that, whether from your own chart or anybody else's you could think of, that would help sort of just sort of dig into when you say the causes.
Okay. Yeah.
How would that help?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yes, and I mean, it's a foundational question, and it gives me the opportunity to go back and say, okay, what are we talking about with a natal chart? So here's a chart run at the moment of birth, and the individual has not breathed first breath, has not lived any of their life at all. And yet we have this map, which we call a horoscope. And as I was saying, there will be 12 houses, 12 planets, and planets in certain of those signs. Well, the understanding that the system is built on, and it wouldn't work if this wasn't the case, is that that is our conditioning stamped with, before we do anything with our life, that is our conditioning in time and space. Okay, so causally, what is it that makes the life turn out in the way that it does turn out? Sometimes despite the best efforts of the personality to turn it in other directions. And so if it is the conditioning in time and space, it is based, the chart is based on parameters of time and place. That's how we get the birth chart. And part of living in the world of effects is that we are conditioned. And those are our conditions. So we can say we're conditioned in time and space. What the natal chart gives us is what is the precise nature of that conditioning. And it does it in planets and signs and houses, which I've said can be translated into ray energies. And so what I do with an individual is I will sit with them for at least 3/4 of an hour and go through as much of that conditioning as that they will understand, not just, you know, what they're meant to do with their spiritual growth, but let's take the basic question of karma. Through the planets Mars and Saturn and the signs Scorpio and Capricorn, I will say what that person's karma is as I understand it, and in which areas of life that karma will come out in. And of course, they have lived their life so many years. And virtually everybody, and I've done over 2,500 interpretations, will say that the karma is with the father, it is with the partner, it is through health issues, it is through job issues or whatever. So that makes you start to realize that what comes in here is the soul looking round at the past lives, and it's got an open, empty wheel. What is the next step in development that this person needs to go through in order to become more holistic in nature? So there will be that element of karma, but there will always be the opportunity for spiritual growth, which again will be at different degrees with the person. So we look at the rising sign, we look at the rule of the rising sign. And so within an hour and a half, I usually are able to give what I consider to be the spiritual agenda for that life. And I would say that the birth chart, the natal chart itself, gives us the basic causes of, that's what people want to know. They know what the effect is. They're suffering from the effect. I've had some very, very difficult cases. Last year, I once had to talk to a young lady who was terminally ill with ovarian cancer. and she wanted some answers, and I had to ask Spirit to give me lots of guidance. She had a little son that she was going to leave behind. So, you know, somebody said to me, you use fortune telling. I said, no, it's a spiritual discipline. It's a long way from fortune telling, because you get some very difficult charts, and the soul can push individuals. But then we take the progress chart, which moves the energies along to, for this month, July 2021, and we will put together the natal chart, which is the basic set of causes, with a new energy matrix. They interact with each other, and that gives people the opportunity to see what it is that, and I say, don't tell me that there's an issue with your job at the moment, I've just lost it, whatever. And then we look at maybe the reasons why. So people come to me with a set of effects, and I attempt, and I'm only going to say attempt, but the system does work. And I say that because, you know, it's not anecdotal evidence, there's real evidence that it does, but it isn't for everybody. It isn't for everybody, because some people say, hey, Ted, I heard you talk, I like it, I'd rather take each day as it comes. I'm not evangelical with this, but I think theosophists are interested to know. And by the way, I don't advertise my services, because I am told, now this is interesting, that only 10% are awakened themselves to want to push their personalities to be in line with what I consider to be the causes through the natal chart. And that's absolutely fine. So if they find their way to me, fine. If they don't, I'm not evangelical. And the money that we charge reflects the fact that it's a spiritual service, and it's not something I pay the bills with or whatever. So I'm very serious about the work, and it's not just a hobby for me to draw up charts. It is meant to be a spiritual service. But if I hadn't got the understanding that I had, or I'd done it for a few years and it was hit and miss, I wouldn't have carried on for this long with it. I'd have found a different path.
Okay, thank you, Ted. I just wanted to mention before I ask the next person to ask a question that I'm quite happy to encourage discussion amongst us. So if there's a question and Ted answers a question and somebody else wants to jump in with a discussion point, please do, because that's to the advantage of all of us. Okay, Tim, you're up.
Thank you, Maurice, and thank you, Ted. And I promise it won't be a difficult question. It won't be a difficult question, because I do believe I may have asked you this question at some point in the distant past. And
Right.
It interests me to know whether, I mean, this is all relatively speaking quite new, coming from Alice Bailey and Douglas Baker, etc., etc. Is there any evidence that you've detected that these ideas are being absorbed by the mainstream psychological community, people in academia or practicing psychologists or other psychological professionals? Is it permeating at all into their world? And if it isn't, do you think it will increasingly start to do that? And how?
Well, I find that quite difficult, actually.
Sorry.
The first part is quite straightforward. I think that if you look in America, there are, on the side of the psychology, a lot of evidence that therapists are taking the esoteric psychology seriously. But I wouldn't, and I don't think there's too much evidence in this country or in Europe, by the way. I don't think there is. But in America, yes, I think, you know, the work of Michael Robbins is a lot to do with that. But I think that as far as the astrology is concerned, it's ruled by the 8th house. And Douglas Baker made the comment on many occasions that the 8th house being ruled by Scorpio, which rules sudden events, it will emerge suddenly into human consciousness. It certainly hasn't at the moment. It certainly hasn't at the moment. And yeah, I'll get out of this question now. I don't know the reason why it hasn't yet, but if the age of Aquarius is the age of I know, and I did start right at the beginning and said to you, the Delphic oracle, man, know thyself, you cannot change yourself unless you know yourself. We know that the knowledge of man is going to be a requisite of getting through the Aquarian age, because the Piscean age was, I believe, and I would never want anyone to believe in this system. I would want people to know that it works for them like I know it works for me, for good or for bad. When I say for good or for bad, some things are very difficult for the personality to accept, but usually these are the times when the soul is pushing more and more. And ultimately, it's going to depend on the number of people who are able to deal with their dwellers on the threshold and this massive cloud that is to do with the solar plexus center and fear that is involved with. What we're talking about here is a very, very finely tuned mental exercise, mental into higher mental, okay? Okay, you know, we've been putting it all in words, but in fact, when you think about these energies and you think about the symbols behind the energies, particularly in astrology, we're talking about symbolic images, etc., that come from dreams. We're talking about higher mind there as well. Whilst the majority of human beings are emotionally polarized and they are driven by those two big factors, fear and desire, they're not going to be able to take on board this astrology. So I do think it's going to depend on the numbers of people who manage to reach mental polarization as we go into the age of Aquarius, which is an air sign. We're moving from Pisces, which is a water sign, emotional. We're moving into an air sign, which is mental. Fire, of course, is spiritual. And the flames of spirit can be fanned by the mind. And it really is a case of turning the mind and the brain through which it operates from, I'm looking over here, material things, the lords of materiality, urging us to be enthralled by the lower vibrations and moving that gaze so that the mind, the same mind, can be illuminated by the truths. The truths come down from the spiritual world through the mental plane. If we're emotionally polarized through those two things, we're not going to see it. So I think that the answer to the second part of your question is it's going to depend on how many people see, and you've got to see the reason for doing it as well. And a lot of people don't. I spoke to someone who is a friend, and I said, you really do need to change your emotional nature. Well, why should I do that? If there's no raison d'etre for it, then, you know, those people aren't going to be. But I do wonder about this, and this might be a little bit controversial. I do wonder that as the age of Aquarius goes on, whether reincarnation might favor immediate reincarnation, I'm talking about maybe within 10, 20 years, might favor those who are higher up on the consciousness, you know, so it will be more easy, because we do know with the population explosion that there is a demand in the inner worlds for, you know, emotional matter to make an emotional body that comes, you know, once the essence is released from the mental permanent atom or the astral permanent atom, it has to have a body to clothe in on it. And it's been explained to me that it's like going into a shop and saying, I want astral matter now, I'm going to reincarnate, I need mental matter as well. There's only so much, and with the population explosion that there's been there may not be enough. And so it might be a controversial thing, but I'll mention it. There might be in the future, and it's a suggestion, I've no evidence for it, selective reincarnation. And if that selective reincarnation favored the mentally polarized, this might happen more quickly. It's just a suggestion.
Thank you, Ted, for thanks.
Just to clear up one point, there is a modality within, well, I'm a psychoanalyst, so there is a modality in psychoanalyst work that does cover what you suggested is the idea of the soul and the spiritual side. Many of these psychoanalytic aspects also use different language, but are referring to the superconsciousness. Thomas, you have a question. Thomas, can you unmute yourself? give Thomas a moment to fill out.
Sorry about that. I couldn't find the button. Yeah, thanks. It's a wonderful, wonderful presentation. I did actually send you a text on one item regarding the Aum, A-U-M, and Ramakrishna I just finished reading his book, actually, The Sage of India, I think it was. And he says it, and I've done yoga for 40 years, and they say instead of, you can say Om, but you can also say Aum, and the Aum meaning birth, life, and death. So I don't know if it sort of encapsulates the whole thing, except of course the theosophical view would be in tune with a chant I do every morning, Sata Nama, which is birth, life, death, and rebirth. So I don't know if that fits into what you accept or how, whatever. Yeah. So that's basically my question.
Well, what I favor, and I'll just put it that way because this is the way it fits to me, is that I do like the idea of creation with the A, preservation with the U, and dissolution with the M. So I think it pretty much fits yours, but that's the way I see it. And it's very interesting that the first ray of will and power that I mentioned as being the top vibration is said to be the creator, maintainer, and destroyer. And so it very much fit, the whole Aum very much fits that first ray. And that first ray itself is very pivotal because it actually has two polarities, one in spirit and one in matter. And the one in spirit relates to the, as I understand it, the region of the planet known as Shambhala. And the one in matter relates to a much more shady region known as Agati. And the two energies involved are Agni at the top of the spiral, at the top of the polarity, Agni and Shambhala. And then right at the bottom, we have the Vril energy. And the Vril energy in its correspondence is to the Kundalini. And it is said to be not safe to raise the Kundalini energy or raise the energy of Vril, but Hitler managed to do it with devastating effect, it seems, until we have fully contacted the energy of Agni through Shambhala. And that is the crown center as opposed to the root in the individual. So I do think this first ray of will and power, even aside of its place in esoteric astrology, which I've hitherto been talking about tonight, has got this very special role in creating, maintaining, and destroying. And we have to, we've talked, we've had Laya Yoga, we've had Hatha Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Raja Yoga was the thing in Alice Bailey's time, and Agni Yoga, of which there's a whole series of books dictated, most of them by the Master Moira, the first ray master. Helena Rurick put them down, but she wouldn't put her name on the books. Those Agni Yoga books are very good if you want to study the Shambhala stroke Agni side of the first ray. But I do believe the Aum is encompassed in the first ray.
Yeah, I do thank you for that. And what you say about, the destroyer, that's basically, Ramakrishna also says that. He doesn't just say this is the way it is and that's the end of it. He gives alternates, as you have. And I think, do you have a book or a CD on the rays that you've written?
Could you email me and I'll point you in the direction? I haven't written anything myself on it, but I could certainly give you more information on it. I could scan you some very useful documents, and anyone for that matter, if you're that interested. My scanner's up and working tomorrow after 6 months of not having one, all being well, fingers crossed, and I'd be happy to scan any amount of documents to any of you on these matters, but please do email me at e.capstick, that's E for Edward, e.capstick @btinternet.com. I don't know if you could put that in the chat.
At BT Internet, for British Telecom, yeah, British
Telecom, BT Internet, all one word, .com.
Okay, I'll do that, and I thank you very much.
Give me some time to do it.
Awareness.
Yeah, because you're on the list. Okay, thanks.
Well, that's okay. I have patience. And what you said to me about, I'll just finish off with this. What you said to me about Ray 1, it really vibrates with me because I am an Aries. So a lot of what you said, just
development of Ray 1 is important in your life. Yeah.
So thank you so much, and I'll say goodbye. And I'm sorry to be so,
Thomas,
loquacious.
Thank you, Thomas. Can I just say that's why you're attracted to the Aum, in my view. That is why you're attracted to the Aum. It's because of your the insistence of your soul wanting you to understand the first ray.
Okay, well, wonderful stuff. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Ted, can I just add a comment?
Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
Sorry to jump in, but it's just on the what's said about the AUM. A is Brahma, the creator. U is Lord Vishnu, which of course is the sustainer, and the M is Rudra, which is the destructive form of Shiva, destroying ignorance, also called Maheshwara. So AUM does indeed, the three letters transcribed into English does represent the trinity of the Hindu deities: Brahma, Vishnu, Brahma the creator, Vishnu the sustainer, and then M, which is essentially Shiva, Lord Shiva, which is the destroyer of ignorance. So it fits in exactly with what you were saying.
Thank you, Paul.
Can I jump in with the next one with that now, please? Yeah, I hope the gentleman before hasn't gone, because the AUM is also the resonance within the body. The R sound resonates with the lower chakras, the digestive system, therefore the more material side of things. The U sound resonates in the heart, the upper chest, which is the lungs, and the sound is resonating with the head chakras. And having made a sound, it's a very nasal sound, and that sound pushes the sound up into the higher chakras in the head and the thousand petal lotus. You can try this for yourself, chant the R sound in the lower part of the body, the U sound in the middle, the sound in the head, and the Om. If there's any confusion between the AUM, the Om sound, and the Om is the seed mantra. It's the Bija mantra, which encompasses the whole of the other three seed sounds, if you like. So it's not two separate things. The Om is the universal sound, the all, the sound that the universe makes as it moves.
Yep, absolutely.
The whole thing. So there's many, many layers with that.
Okay, thank you for that, Barbara. Do you have a question?
No, I don't have a question. I just wanted to
make a
put
comment.
that clarification.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's quite obvious, Ted, that you need to get scribing and complete your book, which has been underway for a few years, I believe. Does anybody else have a question they'd like to ask or make a comment even?
I have a technical question for Ted. As I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, so when you're looking at the chart, you're really just looking at where the planets are based and then coming to some sorts of compromise about the balance of the rays. Is that how it works?
Well, yeah, I mean, we do use the angular, the situation, the angular aspects as well. But essentially, yes, we're looking at the ray components of planets and the way that they're aspected to other planets to see what the problem may be, and secondly what the resolution might be. So yes, all the time it works at intuitive levels. Once you know what the rays are, you can work this out reasonably quickly, and you can see that if, for example, planets in Leo, which rule the heart, are square to planets in Scorpio, which essentially is conflict through the solar plexus center, then you can see that someone is going to be going through it emotionally, and the houses will tell you which of that. So unlike your wonderful Vedic astrology, which I have immense respect for, what this astrology does is give answers very, very quickly without looking at many divisional charts like you have in yours as well. So yes, it is. All the information is there on a natal and progress chart for me to work with, and I don't have to go down to finer level of divisional detail as you do. And I'm sure yours is, of course, a different astrology as well. In many ways, you don't use some of the planets we use, and we don't.
Do you? Sorry, I think you just answered that, but I lost the sound. You don't use the nodes, but you do use the outer planets, presumably.
Yeah, we use all of the outer planets as well. I would like to say thanks to you, Paul. I do use the nodes because I found that they do add an extra layer to interpretation. And whilst it wouldn't be right to say my interpretation is incomplete without the nodes, they do add something. They are certainly effective. They are certainly effective in bringing out certain things in certain people's charts. And you know that from my own chart as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Thanks.
Thanks.
I should just mention, Ted, that there have been a number of comments. If you just want to skim the chat part, you'll see a few people have made some complimentary comments about your talk. Is there anybody else who would like to ask a question? No, we'll just wait for Ted to...
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, okay, go ahead.
Ted, you mentioned Lemuria, and I was wondering, I didn't quite catch the ray of the Lemurians.
Oh no, yes, I mentioned the age of Lemuria, which
That's right.
Preceded Atlantis, only to point out that the mental development of man goes way, way, way back, even before Atlantis, and to say that there was, as Theosophy understands it, and as I understand this as well, there was intervention by highly mental beings, sometimes called the Lord of the Flame, sometimes called the Manasaputras or Sons of Mind, to implant a seed of higher mentality in the nature of humanity, which meant that we were to become the dominant species on the earth. That was an evolutionary push that was, Venus is said to be, these beings living in Venus, of course, not physical, they can only come down as low as higher mind. And my view is it's incumbent upon us to get at least our consciousness to higher mind. There's Buddhi and there's Atma above it, but at least to higher mind to link with the solar angel. And the solar angel is said to be the Davic counterpart of the human soul. And so the solar angel may be there, but unless we make this is the importance of this mental polarization I mentioned before, unless we can deal with the emotional side of things, and I'm coming back to you on something, I think you've emailed me, haven't you?
Yes, yes.
To do with the emotions.
That's right, yes.
What we have, the preliminary work on the personality is done through the taming of the emotions via the mind and the will. We have to, at some point, develop emotional intelligence if we're going to work on contact with the solar angel, which is part of the whole idea of what happened in Lemuria. Now, I didn't say that before. I just mentioned Lemuria as being a turning point in the evolution of man's consciousness through this idea of mental contact in the way. But it behoves us all, if we're seriously on the spiritual path, to look at this idea of becoming an occultist and learning to touch things through higher mentality rather than the idea of mysticism, which to me is much more related to the sixth ray of devotion and idealism, where the mental plane appears to be bypassed almost completely.
Thank you.
Okay, well, if there's no further questions, I'd just like to thank you very much, Ted. I've given out a lot of energy this evening, and I'm sure that we have all benefited from your talk.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. And with that, I would like to say good night to you all. This is recorded, so if you want to go back and reflect on some of the things that Ted has said or the questions that have been asked, please do take advantage of it.
Can I just thank you and everybody else for your work in the White Lotus group, and the fact that I've also had the chance to look at several extraordinary interesting presentations. You put together an extremely strong syllabus. I don't often listen to other people, but I found myself coming back and back again. So I wanted to thank you for that and all the work that you've done, as well as the invites, and to thank everybody here this evening for giving up an hour and a half of their time. And that's why it's behoving on me to give out as much as I can, and with the energy that I'm able to muster, because your time is valuable, and I do appreciate it. When we get a turnout like tonight, I do appreciate it very much.
We appreciate it more.
Well, I hope in the future, Ted, we can find a platform to work together.
Absolutely.
Anyway, good night, everybody, and have a great
Thank
week.
you, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Oh, fantastic. Bye, everybody. I love you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye. Brilliant.